Archie Giant Series 545. Hilda's exhausted and says she never thought she'd have her backyard luncheon finished. She must have used enough magic at once to get tired. Witches show up from all over the world just to go to Hilda's cookout. How famous is Hilda? A witch comments that the long flight here left her starved. I guess the reason they didn't all teleport to her backyard is that there'd be a risk of telefragging themselves if they were all gonna do that. And that's why they just fly to stuff like witch conventions. But they'd still warp somewhere close to the backyard and then start flying there. Plus, she could have summoned food and eaten it while magically stuck to the broom. It's interesting that Hilda tells them to hang up their brooms before eating. It turns out Jughead's eating at their luncheon, and Hilda thinks he's ruined everything, when it seems like he only just got here. I have to assume there was a big time skip. Sabrina says he didn't touch the dragon salad yet. Surprisingly, Hilda turns him into a frog for eating a bunch of food that any one of these witches could summon again, because she's that mad at the minor inconvenience. And for no reason he's still able to talk as a frog. All he says here is that he's suddenly crazy about bugs and flies. I'm forced to just assume that part of the spell that turned him into a frog has him unable to get freaked out about it. But when she did this to punish him, why does she do this too? Maybe he knows that it'll probably get turned back to normal eventually because he knows Sabrina and Zelda are nice and related to the obvious witch, so he doesn't take it seriously. Thankfully, Zelda says that Hilda's gone too far, and Hilda fortunately explains that all of this magic takes so much out of her, which helps justify why she cared so much. Zelda looks on the bright side that it looks nicer than before, even though she would have just summoned the same things again. Sabrina for some reason thinks she has to rush to the magic book to change Jughead back to normal, even though she once turned Reggie into a monkey and effortlessly turned him back to normal with a spell. I'm just forced to assume that she tried to return him to normal the easy way, and it didn't work as a part of Hilda's spell. Instead, her spell can only be broken if a beautiful girl kisses them. Why would Hilda make her spell possible to break by someone other than her? Also, if it's cast by her and she thinks ugly women are beautiful, wouldn't that mean only an ugly girl could break a spell? Jughead tells his friends to wait for him, and at first they think they're dreaming. And then Reggie jumps into Archie's arms terrified, only to immediately snark that Jughead looks better as a frog. I guess him knowing Sabrina's a witch is why he recovered from this so fast, and is able to casually tell Veronica what happened, because he knows Sabrina's a good person who will break the spell on him. Betty screams at learning the truth, and Sabrina runs up to her because of it. Reggie accuses Sabrina of doing this to Jughead. To be fair, she did turn Reggie into a monkey once, so she's not above this herself. Archie wonders if Sabrina knows how to change Jughead back. Either he knows she's a witch already, or he took what Reggie said seriously. Sabrina shouldn't have said, "I think," when she knows it for a fact. Of course, Veronica's so selfish that she refuses to kiss Jughead. I wish she explained that she assumes Betty will be pretty enough to do it, and nice enough, and so she has no reason to. But with the way she treats Betty like she's so much prettier than her, it's easy not to think of that. Reggie offers to walk her home, and Betty kisses Jughead and returns him to normal. All Jughead says about this is that he's still hungry, which makes sense because Sabrina casts a spell to make her friends forget what happened. And I hope part of the spell involves making sure that Archie still thinks Betty's a swell girl. I guess Sabrina anticipated Archie's reaction to this. Ideally, that'd be why she had Betty do it, instead of doing it herself. The story ends with Jughead still craving frog food for no reason. This story is about Jughead eating from the witch luncheon and Hilda turning him into a frog for it because she's already exhausted from magic use as it is. I know it's called a witch luncheon, but it would have been smarter to have a big feast for witches at night, when mortals wouldn't be as likely to find it. Since Zelda disapproved of what she did, I have to assume the reason she didn't try to help Jughead is that she had total faith in Sabrina to break the spell on him. But it's very lucky for Jughead that a pretty girl actually did break the spell, because from Hilda's perspective, Ethel would be beautiful by witch standards. But come to think of it, I don't remember Ethel being in Little Archie, so a different girl would be needed. I just have to assume part of the frog spell is that Sabrina and Zelda can't just say a spell to return to normal from a distance. But why would Hilda make the spell something that can be broken at all? Archie at Riverdale High, 101. Sabrina reveals that on her birthday, she likes to make her friends' daydreams come true. That could backfire if they were thinking about a worst-case scenario. Or at least something that would get them in trouble. If she was smart, she'd use magic to learn what it is before making it come true. So predictably, Jughead gets food, Moose gets an A, and Archie tells Weatherby that he has no idea how these bathing beauties got here, as he's being needlessly mean to Archie about it. Archie's TV lap out, issue 99. A watchdog committee warps to Hilda when Sabrina's feeding her fish, who she cared enough to put in a whole fish tank instead of a goldfish bowl, thankfully. I like that she has a fish tank like in some other Sabrina story. The Watchdog Committee are apparently sent every year at Christmas by the Witches' Coven at Salem, and they're on the lookout for any witches that fall victim to Christmas cheer. This is an overly depressing, contradictory story. They waste a lot of time talking to Hilda, somehow saying they should be protected from do-gooders. They're also unrealistic by being mad that Hilda said good witches, even though it was clear that she didn't mean morally good. They waste even more time talking when I already know that witches are expected to be evil. Hilda calls them snitches and troublemakers, when normally I'd expect Hilda to be on their side. Then a redhead warps to them, and Hilda annoys me by recognizing her when I don't. She's Tidbit, who waited to warp here first because she conveniently saw those characters prowling around first, when they would have just warped to the house from another house, not warped to just outside the house, for this very reason. Tidbit wastes time complaining about them before saying she's gonna lead them into a trap. At least it's more interesting to have a shiny new character do this kind of thing than someone you'd expect like Ambrose. She wants Sabrina and Hilda to go shopping. Sabrina sees a kid that's whining unsympathetically and feels sorry for her. Hilda gives her a doll in front of the bad guys, as I wonder if that kid is Tidbit in disguise. The bad guys want some evidence of what Hilda did before punishing her. One of them takes the doll away from her. Then out of complete nowhere, he gives her some money to buy herself another doll, which wouldn't happen if he's so obsessed with never helping mortals and being evil. Reality ensues as the kid shouts that her doll got stolen and some adults want to punish them for it, and call security. Thankfully, we don't see the adults get magic used on them. The story ends with a predictable reveal that Tidbit was that little girl, and they make a toast celebrating their victory. This story that was depressing until the end was about a group of witches that get sent to Sabrina to nag her family to not celebrate Christmas and spy on them when they're shopping. It's annoying that it pretends that this happens every year, but it's realistic that it's not Dell herself doing it. It's also annoying that some new character shows up for the Christmas party and Hilda recognizes her, and we're supposed to like her instantly for hating the watchdogs when we know nothing else about her. I like that she got back at them. She pretended to be a little girl to trick the watchdogs into getting beaten up for stealing her doll in public. It's also great pacing that the heroes don't discuss their plan first before carrying it out. But I'd rather see Sabrina lure them to trap, instead of this cocky new character that never shows up at Christmas, but suddenly appeared for this story. But I suppose it's good to have her here, because it tries to make the story stand out better. Life with Archie, 247. Hilda hears Sabrina conveniently say to herself that she's going to be late for a 3 o'clock hairdresser appointment. She tells Sabrina to hop onto her broom, generously offering to help her. Sabrina's broom ride is so fast that her hair gets messed up. Usually that doesn't happen. Somehow the story ends with her saying that she no longer needs to have her hair styled, because she thinks her hair looks great now, when she never has her hair get changed. Betty Me 144. Hilda gets offered cosmetics by a door-to-door salesman and apparently caught her in a really good mood because she doesn't instantly slam the door on him saying no. Instead she says happily that she already looks youthful. He questions her on it, and she says, "Show me another 300-year-old woman who looks as young as I do." It's charming that Sabrina thinks it's funny instead of being scared or embarrassed. Although it is another story that can't decide how old Hilda is. But this is consistent to Monster Melody. Archie 150. Sabrina reveals she's supposed to help raise money for the school band. I'd respect her more if she was choosing to do this. Everywhere she goes, someone's beating her to the punch, getting in someone's door before her with a cup. She decides to go where no one else has done that before, and flies over to construction workers on a broom, when they're standing on very narrow platforms. But if they fainted or something and fell, she'd just point to save them, and no one would believe them. so there's no reason for her not to. So I liked this. She came up with an idea and used her magic. Joke had 339. Sabrina complains about having to deal with too much homework when Hilda still expects her to take part in witch activities. Ambrose wonders how she manages, and she's using a typewriter on a broom that has a lamp connected to it. And I have to assume that the typewriter is stuck on the broom too. It would be pretty distracting for her, trying to do homework on a flying broom. Archie's TV laugh out issue 100. Sabrina says she didn't know Hilda liked rock videos. It's a pleasant surprise because you'd never expect that from a centuries-old person. She says she likes Boy Jojo because he's the only one who dresses normal. But the TV isn't showing the person's entire outfit. So how am I supposed to know what she means? What's the joke? That person looks like a woman with the long hair. I can't help but be disappointed that the issue 100 Sabrina story for this comic was just a short, silly single. Archie at Riverdale High, 102. For no reason, Ambrose sees someone about to break dance on the sidewalk when looking over a fence, and wishes he could spin like him. Hilda gives him a potion, makes him spin around on his head, and says she aims to please when he probably wouldn't enjoy it. Archie's Girls 335. Sabrina tells someone that Hilda's interested in coming to a health spa. The woman says she'll take 10 years off Hilda's age. Sabrina asks her how long Hilda would have to stay to take off 200 years. I have to assume the woman just thinks she's making fun of Hilda's looks, and that Sabrina knows she'll assume that. Betty Me 145. Salem walks near a place with a dog and sign warning about him and magically burns the sign, thinking his magic gets him respect. It's a nice twist that he left the dog alone. Life with Archie 249. Hilda and Sabrina fly away on brooms while hunters shoot. Hilda says the hunters must think they're geese, but they'd never think that because they look nothing like geese. So Hilda casts a spell to ruin their rifles. Everything's Archie 118. Hilda doesn't know why people on the beach are staring at her when she's stirring a cauldron. Wouldn't she and Sabrina know better? She just wonders if they've seen a beach cookout before. Jughead 341. Sabrina doesn't want to join Hilda for water polo because she doesn't like that witches play with crocodiles. I have to assume the crocodiles are brainwashed to be harmless. And while it's illogical of her to still not trust them, it's also realistic. Archie's TV Laugh Out issue 101. Big Top Topper. The top of the page explains that Sabrina has a part-time job with a circus in the story. I think the rest of the text there makes it too obvious how the story's gonna go. Sabrina taking this job comes out of nowhere. It's kind of off-putting because it starts out in media res. She's told that the reason our manager looks sad is because the new owner wants him to make changes. Somehow he thinks the charm of a circus is that it never changes, as opposed to the charm being the performers. It's forced that there's a guy here called Mr. McNasty. He wants to make a bigger profit from the circus. I don't know what the changes are going to be right away, so it seems unfair for the story to already be portraying him as evil, calling him by that, when making money is what businessmen have to do. It's even making him look evil in appearance, off-puttingly so. The problem is he wants the manager to cancel some of the acts, so that's technically a change. He could have meant replacing an act. The manager is told that the ringmaster came down with laryngitis. Sabrina says that she knows what the ringmaster is supposed to say, as apparently she's heard it enough to have it completely memorized. So the manager agrees to let her do it because things can't get any worse. That's a good enough excuse for Sabrina to be the ringmaster. And I thought it'd just be ridiculous. That night, Mr. McNasty wants the ringmaster act gotten rid of instantly because it's the same old act as always. Well, people have the right to be bored by seeing the same thing over and over again. She casts a spell so that suddenly there's a human there instead of a lion. He's naturally impressed and asks how Sabrina did that. While sexistly assuming she's a guy just because she's the ringmaster, because her hair is just that short that she's mistaken for a man, but it's not like he's right up close to her. It's exciting that she doesn't even try to hide her magic. And this guy's conveniently assuming it's just a magic trick, which must be why Della doesn't step in and ruin her fun. She introduces the tightrope act. He wants to get rid of that too because it's tired and old. It is a cliche, but it's still impressive. It'd be scary at first just to watch, let alone do. But I can't blame him for getting bored of seeing a guy slowly walking across a tightrope after a couple of seconds. The only thing wrong with getting rid of that act is that the tightroper would be losing his job. But they should be replacing it with something that's interesting to see. Sabrina uses magic to let him walk without a tightrope. I assume the way this works is that he's walking on a wide, invisible bridge. Because if he was still constrained to a very narrow tightrope, he'd just panic and fall off it if he couldn't see it. You'd think the tightrope artist would faint after this. But neither of this is explained. McNasty wants to get rid of the elephant. I guess it's because he's bored of that too. He doesn't explain himself. Again, it is a cliche. Sabrina uses magic so that the elephant spells its name with water. So McNasty cheers up and says that every one of the acts is a winner. And the manager asks whoever dreamed up that stunt of the elephants. Why doesn't he assume it was Sabrina's when all of this only happened after she was hired? Well, because you couldn't train an elephant to do that right away. Or ever. So she'd never have the time herself, as far as he knows. But it's pretty easy to come up with what the elephant did. Sadly, the story ends with McNasty being sprayed with water. It's sad because this would mean that he'd cancel the elephant act after all, if he was that irritable. This story was about a guy wanting to cancel acts at a circus so it'd save money. Being portrayed as completely evil to the point of having an evil name and appearance, even though, of course, a businessman would want to save money. And because the ringmaster has laryngitis, the manager hires Sabrina as a replacement just because things can't get any worse. I'm impressed that there was a believable explanation for what would normally be a memorably silly concept to the point of being off-putting. So Sabrina uses magic so that all the acts impress him. You'd think the manager would figure out she's a witch though, but she could always erase his memory of this.